Welcome to a special post-Sabbath coffee with yours truly, Adrian Hannah Dragon. We'll do a coffee with special cup of coffee as a world peace advocate, independent student scholar of history, wars, geopolitics, and civilizations. As a universal spiritual teaching student, because I'm learning things every day, and as a independent security analyst and theorist, and before all that, fundamentally, the essence, yours truly, Adrian Hannah Dragon, born Adrian H. Dragon, who died during this COVID, is fundamentally, in essence, the world's greatest living, dancing, millennial rainbow poet. World's greatest dancing, living, millennial rainbow poet. Fundamentally, I am the world's greatest living, dancing, millennial rainbow poet. Those 7 words. And then, independent security analyst and theorist and universal spiritual teaching student and independent artist, athlete, and activist, and yours truly, universal spiritual teaching student and world peace advocate, and yours truly, Adrian H. Dragon, died during COVID, being reborn with every step, every push-up, every hawk, every squat, every dancing move. This is yours truly, Adrian Hannah Dragon, androgynous founder and the dancing goddess and the dragon empire for world peace, international justice and security, global freedom and universal love, and yours truly, universal revolutionary centrist. I'm going to be drinking some coffee. I'm actually going to be pouring some right now. Remember the motto of the dancing goddess, who dances with her brother the sun, to make and create all fruits, vegetables, and legumes, that all ALL fruits, vegetables, and legumes are made, created, and produced by the dance of the goddess with her brother the sun, for us, and harvested by our brothers and sisters, for us to build, maintain, or upgrade civilizations. And those fruits, vegetables, and legumes were made, created, and produced by the dance of the goddess with her brother the sun back in ancient Egypt to build those pyramids, and in ancient Rome to build the roads, and of course in ancient China to build the Great Wall, as they are harvested today, the fruits of the dancing goddess who dances with her brother the sun there is. And of course for us in 2018 to build (2018) 2021, thinking of the beginning of the US-China trade war in 2018, since a little bit of this lecture will revolve around that, a little bit of this discussion, but nonetheless in 2018 too, that fruits, vegetables, and legumes were made and created and produced by the dance of the goddess with her brother the sun, just as in ancient Egypt, ancient Roman Empire, and ancient China as they are today, for us to build, maintain, or upgrade civilization, whether here in Montreal, Hawk Island, in New York, Los Angeles, Beijing, Tel Aviv, Berlin, Lagos, or anywhere around the world for that matter. Those fruits, vegetables, and legumes are made, created, and produced by the dance of the goddess with her brother the sun, and harvested by our brothers and sisters to build, maintain, or upgrade civilization. And yours truly, even this black coffee bean was made, created, and produced by the dance of the goddess with her brother the sun, which yours truly is now drinking to give this lecture, philosophical discussion, and Adrian H. Dragon, Adrian Hannah Dragon, reborn talk. A little bit of the introduction. Yours truly, Adrian H. died during COVID. I think I had COVID back before mass testing was available. Was sick and diseased. It was like death, pestilence, and disease in my body. End of January 2020 until about February 20 or so, was ill, sick, and diseased. I said many ways I think it was COVID. I'm pretty sure it was COVID. Now my trinity on COVID: first and foremost, I do not know what caused COVID. I believe it was snakes to human beings. And third, since I do not know for sure, I cannot rule out another possibility, XYZ, be it a lab experiment, an accident in a lab, an experiment gone wrong, etc., a bioweapon, etc., etc., etc. However, a fourth dimension to that trinity on COVID, what I do know 100% is that before COVID, about 93 days, yours truly, world peace advocate, independent student, scholar of history, geopolitics, wars, and civilization, and independent security analyst and theorist, alarmed by what had transpired in the world, had taken into consideration the geopolitical events such as the US-China trade war, which started in March 2018 by the Trump administration, which I think was a mistake. There could have been alternatives. The deterioration of relations, Canadian Sino-Canadian relations, and diplomatic geopolitical crisis between Canada and China by the arrest of Meng Wanzhou by the RCMP. Meng Wanzhou, aka Kathy Meng, the chief financial officer of Huawei, the biggest telecommunications equipment maker in the world, which had overtaken Apple and Samsung to become the biggest telecommunications equipment maker in the world. Huawei and internet infrastructure hardware producer. Huawei, based in China, founded in '89 by the father of Kathy Meng, aka Meng Wanzhou, Reng Shengfui, and her arrest, Meng Wanzhou, that is, chief financial officer and daughter of the founder of Huawei, by the RCMP in December 2018 in order to honor an extradition treaty with the United States. Let it be known and understood that as a universal spiritual teaching student, believe in reincarnation, and as a matter of fact, down that way, down south, 156 years ago, 718 miles that way, was born in the USA and fought and served in the US Army 156 years ago, and in another life was also born in what is now today known as the continental United States of America, USA, United States of America, one of the 3 countries in North America, although if you can include the islands, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, which I do, part of North America, Cuba, Haiti, and Dominican Republic. Yours truly, Adrian H, is a independent student scholar of history, civilizations and wars, and geopolitics. Back in 2019, October to be precise, alarmed by what was going on in the world as a world peace advocate paradoxically, but also in complementary parallel with being an independent security analyst and theorist, saying as an analyst of geopolitics, history and civilizations, wars that were on a path to World War III because of the US-China trade war, the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, and subsequently the deterioration of relations between Canada and China, the Sino-Canadian diplomatic political crises, subsequent to the arrest by China of Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor, 2 Canadian nationals, triggered even deeper political crises, and in the recent days and weeks has even escalated further with the European Union and North America, relations with China and other laws and motions and speeches and back and forth, tit for tat, retaliatory tariffs, economic, financial, commercial tariffs, and exchanges, verbal exchanges, diplomatic exchanges. Now, I'm not a communist, I'm not a fascist, I'm a world peace advocate. I believe I'm a universal revolutionary centrist, and my universal revolutionary centrism is embodied in the dancing goddess and the dragon empire, of which you can see the emblem flag, the dancing goddess, the priestess is yours truly, Hannah, H, and the red dragon is yours truly, the flag of the dragon empire, which is one with the dancing goddess, and the dancing goddess and the dragon empire are one, and of course yours truly is a rainbow dragon, part of the LGBTQ community. I've repressed for more than 13.3 years a suicidal, depressed struggle with my bisexuality, embarrassed, ashamed, having homoerotic interracial lusts and desires, etc., etc., etc. Only 7 years ago came out, participated in a few prides in Montreal, and since 72 hours ago I'm happy to announce that the Pride Parade will take place in Montreal, now known as Hawk Island. Anyways, yours truly as a student scholar of history. This is a special Sino-Western China cup of coffee. And of course I'm going to go back in time a little bit to October 2019. Yours truly was alarmed by what's transpiring in the world. The US-China trade war, the Trump administration, and I have nothing against Trump personally, although I believe that Trump made a mistake. He and many in the West failed to see China and see China only through a communist, one-party Marxist socialist state, which paradoxically China is a one-party state. However, China is much more than that, and is a civilization which is more than 5,000 years old, which I think many in the West do not fully understand or comprehend, or fail to see China more for what it is also. Not just a one-party communist state, but a civilization which is more than 5,000 years old. and has a complex, rich, and diverse culture, which includes architectural, scientific, financial, philosophical, spiritual, social, culinary culture, and linguistic culture combined. Linguistic, architectural, philosophical, social, spiritual culture, which is more than 5,000 years old, which many in the West do not fully comprehend. And many in the West, North America, you see China's only through the lens of a one-party communist state, which paradoxically still it is. And we don't fully understand socialism with Chinese characteristics, of which this cup of coffee is going to be doing some reading, or still even learning as I go. Learning things every day, don't know it all, have issues. I'm not perfect, far from it. Sometimes I'm angry, moody, upset. Living the worst financial situation of my adult life, paradoxically getting in the fittest physical condition of my adult life. And am not without vices. I'm not a saint. Across the great desert, struggled financial precariousness for years with chronic illness in this hawk island formerly known as Montreal. The libraries of the city became my second home. The books, tens of thousands of books, my friends. I've been on my own for many, many years. One I got close by is my friend, oftentimes teacher, the one I love and call sister, who's really my only family, and to that trinity of sister, friend, teacher adds a fourth dimension of being my one and only for the moment financial sponsor. And all willingly loving to join the dancing goddess and the Dragon Empire and the Phoenix People's Party, the anti-war, anti-poverty, anti-racism, pro-love, universal revolutionary centrist party are welcome to do so. Willingly loving. In my name being reborn, Adrian Hannah Dragon should have commenced like this, but better late than never. My allies and armies, brothers and sisters, in my name being reborn, yours truly born Adrian H being reborn during this COVID, Adrian Hannah Dragon. May you be able to do thousands of squats, millions of push-ups, millions of hawks, millions of dancing moves, millions of marching steps. I bless you with millions of kisses, hugs, and rubs. Yours truly, Adrian Hannah Dragon, androgynous pansexual founder of the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Empire, which are one empire under the sun and stars on earth, the non-sectarian way, universal revolutionary centrist. Created a workout called officially General War Integrated Total Body Training System, aka the 300 workout, designed, made, and created to go hand in hand with a World War III scenario in October 2019. Afterwards, alarmed by what was transpiring in the world, and of course, it resembles the COVID-19 health and financial crisis predating it, and since July 24th, due to that paradox, the financial crisis of the COVID and COVID health and financial crisis resembling my scenario, my World War III scenario, which of course the workout was created, made, and designed to go hand in hand with the World War III scenario. I've been advocating for the creation or the institution of the solution as envisioned in my scenario, namely the creation of the International Citizen Integrated Social Security Force, aka the Dragon Army, in order to secure the three elements of civilization: food, housing, and transport for all via public-private partnership, the universal currency by the creation of the global central bank, by debt refusing all private and public debt, creating the two institutions of the Dancing Army and the Dragon Army to secure food, housing, and transport for world peace, international justice, and security, and global love by biometrics. The hand, the eyes, and the voice are unique biometrics. Now, before I go into this, I want to say that yours truly created a scenario based on what had transpired in the world. As a paradox, as a world peace advocate, I am still calling for the reestablishment of cordial, mutually beneficial, and friendly relations with China. Sino-Canadian, Sino-North American, Sino-Western relations. I believe the trade war was a mistake. I think that Granddaddy Trump, who never could be my grandfather, had an antiquated, backwards, perhaps Western chauvinist view of China as one of a China of the 1960s, 1970s, perhaps pre-1984 China, People's Republic of China. And began the trade war. I think was a mistake. Imposing tariffs on more than 665 billion worth of goods from China, I believe it was a mistake. And of course, I do believe there were alternatives. Now, I'm not a communist, I'm not a fascist, I'm a universal revolutionary centrist. There are issues which I'm not going to go into. Present situations and the escalations are even closer to a step to World War III, which is a world peace advocate I'm hoping to avert by writing poetry, dancing, and working out, and calling all willingly loving to join the non-sectarian Dancing Goddess and Dragon Empire. I'm a non-sectarian. The Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Empire, which are one empire under the sun and the stars on earth, for world peace, international justice and security, global freedom and universal love, are non-sectarian in all, non-sectarian and spiritually, socially, financially. gotta adhere to the principles. You can be an ally, supporter, and troop army of the Dancing Goddess, army of the Dragon Army. Yours truly, Adrian H, being reborn Adrian Hannah Dragon, world peace advocate, independent student, scholar of history, geopolitics, Dragon Zero, Captain, General Captain, founder of the Dragon Army. The motto is nobody is born a dragon, you become one through blood, sweat, and tears. And myself, not a dragon because of a surname, and I've not inherited wealth. I've struggled for many years alone, solo, still struggling financially, hoping for my first commission donation via PayPal or commissioning my email on the YouTube channel, of course, which is raw and filtered and rarely paused and just most 93% unscripted. Although before sometimes I think of the topic, like today's going to be topic China, SINO, specifically SINO Western relations, SINO Canadian relations, SINO North American relations, and perhaps better yet understanding modern China and specifically the ideas behind socialism with Chinese characteristics. Yours truly, calling upon all willingly living to join as allies, supporters, troops of the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Army and the Phoenix People's Party, anti-war, anti-poverty, anti-racism, pro-love, universal revolutionary centrist party, putting my theory of debt refusion, DEBT, refusion into action, refusing all private and public debt. My private debt is $10,000. Let's say if I'm X1, you're X2, and there's hundreds of millions of X's in debt. If I'm X1, you're X2, taking together all the numbers of X's around the world, local, national, international, taking that number, and if Y, the Y is the letter Y, is the public debt, that means Canada, let's say Y, United States Y, Germany Y4, Israel Y5, and Y1 plus Y2 plus until 156 countries, taking all that number in US dollars, crediting with that number my debt refusion, making not annulling, canceling it, but putting it for the creation of the global central bank to create and do the universal unit of exchange, sun credit if you will, to finance the Dancing Goddess Army, officially titled International Integrated Social Security Force, to complement the International Integrated Dance League, the Dancing Goddess Army, in parallel, complementary covenant cooperative army of the Dancing Goddess Army and the Dragon Army, the Dancing Goddess Army, officially titled International Integrated Dance League, to organize mass dancing events for the mass financing of solar, hydro, and electric power, and to mass clean the oceans, rivers, waterways, forests, lakes, and mountains by organizing mass dancing events. The Dragon Army, officially the International Citizen Integrated Social Security Force, to secure food, housing, and transport by creating this Dragon Army from all existing public and private security forces, first of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization member countries, which are 30, calling upon Israel to be the 31st NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization member country, hopefully by tonight or tomorrow, July 19, 2021. Israel will join NATO. And from all public and private security forces and armed forces to create the institution, the International Citizen Integrated Social Security Force, aka the Dragon Army, to secure food, housing, and transport, just was envisioned in my scenario, which in a paradoxical, providential parallel ways resembles the COVID-19 health and financial crises, and predates it by 93 days. In my scenario, there was a stock market crash. A fictitious stock market crash which triggers a global financial collapse and subsequently a surprise attack by North Korea and China on the North American West Coast. As a world peace advocate, in complementary also as a student scholar of geopolitics, history, wars and civilizations, I've taken the US-China trade war as an event inspiring my scenario, World War III, and a historical event known as Pearl Harbor, the Japanese army attacking the naval base Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. So took that into consideration, created the World War III scenario. Stock market crash due to COVID occurred about 93 or so days later of my beginning of my scenario, which is a not so distant future timeline, in parallel with my performance and doing the sessions of the General War Integrated Total Body Training System, those 7 wards. General War Integrated Total Body Training System, aka the 300 workout, which I've created to go hand in hand with the scenario, the World War III scenario, and to be is the de facto exercise which anybody willingly loving to join the Dragon Army as the next Dragon is yours truly is becoming Dragon Zero, General Founding Captain of the Dragon Army, must be able to do. And these are the rules. You got 93 minutes to do 100 push-ups, 100 squats, 100 hawks. That trinity adds the fourth dimension of integrating the cardio. And you gotta do maximum 13 reps per set, or minimum 3, or anywhere in between. And until you get to 100, you can switch around. There's no order prescribed but you gotta do 100 squats, 100 push-ups, 100 hawks, 100 for each of that exercise. Hawks, push-ups, squats, which is the trinity. You can check it out. My videos on Facebook. And of course, a maximum 13 repetitions per set, minimum 3, or anywhere in between. 31 seconds minimum marching, jogging, walking fast pace in between is required. So once you start the 93-minute clock, there's no pause. You gotta march, jog, walk fast pace, warm up, and do push-ups, squats, hawks, 100 for each. Maximum 13 repetitions per set, minimum 3. Those two numbers go together, 13 and 3. Anywhere in between, I'm doing 10 reps. Sets of 10 reps, so 10 times 10 is easy, count 100. But you gotta march, jog, walk, fast pace, a minimum of 31 seconds in between. There's no pause. So this is the de facto examination and the de facto exercise of the Dragon Army for maintenance and building health, natural raw muscle mass that requires no equipment whatsoever. All ALL orders given by Dragon Zero to the Dragon Army must be obeyed. No order will be given but to secure food, housing, and transport. Things health, fitness, love, an order Dragon Zero will give that not myself will willingly execute. That is the General War Integrated Body Training System. Paradoxical, providential, in a parallel way. COVID, I think I had it. I tested 3 times negative, got my jab in the May, and getting this second dose coming days, but I think I had COVID. In many ways, Adrian H. Dragon did die, being reborn. Adrian Hannah Dragon, androgynous, pansexual, founder of the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Empire for war, peace, international justice and security, universal love, and global freedom. And of course, paradoxically, since my scenario was a stock market crash, the stock market crash occurred due to COVID, started February 20th, 2020, and ended about April 7th, triggering the worst financial, economic, global crisis since the Great Depression in more than 70 years, right? According to IMF World Bank. Yours truly now will go up and read about China. One last thing, I'm going to say a little bit, we pick it up now. On China, I think that Trump, Granddaddy Trump, who I'm still challenging on a boxing match to the Canadian-US border, I think that Trump made a mistake with a trade war, had an antiquated view of China. Now fully understand China as a civilization and only see it through the lens of a one-party communist state. Since 1984, China rose to become the world's biggest producer factory of goods and services, and after the great financial crisis, since about the beginning of 2008, China has been the main exporter and the second world's biggest economy, the most exporting, producing factory of the world, in parallel with the biggest market and consumer of goods, the two pillars of the global financial and economic system and international commercial system and global financial system and worldwide economic system. The two pillars of the global financial system and the world economic system and the international commercial system are the biggest importers and exporters. The biggest exporters and importers, the biggest producers and consumers, throughout which the other constellations, which are the nations, revolve around. So the top, late 2007, come China, exporter, producer, consumer market, the United States of America, supporting the trade war to stabilize the world financial, economic, commercial system, right? Because of these two pillars of the global integrated economy, right, and created tensions. I believe it was a mistake. There could have been alternative solutions. I'm not a communist or a fascist. I'm a universal revolutionary centrist. I believe many do not fully understand China, and gave me goosebumps to listen to Xi Jinping, and my message to my Chinese brothers and sisters for war, peace, international justice and security, global freedom, universal love. To Xi Jinping, my message, Dragon Zero's message, Priestess Hannah's message, Adrian Hannah Dragon's message. To Xi Jinping and the people of China and Chinese is 3 learns. I'm learning Chinese for world peace as my New Year's resolution. It's 3 words. He, home, Jiu. He, home, Jiu. He, home, Jiu. If you made it this far, it's only 5 minutes into it, try to figure out what I'm saying. Of course, if you're a speaker of Chinese, let me know if I mispronounced it and what was I saying. Well, that's my message for world peace and love to Han Chinese, to people of China, the Chinese diaspora, Xi Jinping. Yours truly, Adrian H., independent student, scholar of history, civilizations, wars, and geopolitics, world peace advocate, and world's greatest living dancing millennial rainbow poet. Will now read to understand better for my own education, for my own knowledge and learning things every day. To understand better China, we'll proceed in doing some readings, specifically more modern about Xi Jinping and China and socialism with Chinese characteristics. Because that is the official ideology in many ways of China. And what does it mean? What do we understand? And how much do we know? I'm going to start with socialism with Chinese characteristics. The theoretical system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Is a set of political theories and policies that are seen by their proponents as representing Marxism-Leninism, adapted to Chinese circumstances and specific time periods. And I think this is important. Chinese circumstances and specific time periods, consisting of Deng Xiaoping theory, 3 represents Jiang Zemin, scientific outlook on development, Hu Jintao, and Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. In this view, Xi Jinping thought is considered to represent Marxist-Leninist policies suited for China's present condition, while Deng Xiaoping theory was considered relevant for the period when it was formulated. The term entered common usage during the era of Deng Xiaoping and was largely associated with Deng's overall program of adopting elements of market economics as a means to foster growth using foreign investment and to increase productivity, especially in the countryside where 80% of China's population lived. While the Chinese Communist Party retained both its formal commitment to achieve communism and its monopoly on political power. In the party's official narrative, socialism with Chinese characteristics is Marxism-Leninism adapted to Chinese conditions and a product of scientific socialism. The theory stipulated that China was in the primary stage of socialism due to its relatively low level of material wealth and needed to engage in economic growth before it pursued a more egalitarian form of socialism, which in turn would lead to a communist society described in Marxist orthodoxy. Primary stage of socialism. So this is socialism with Chinese characteristics. During the Mao era, the concept of a primary stage of socialism was conceived before China introduced economic reforms. In the early 1950s, economists Yu Guangzhou, Huo Mukao, and Sun Yifeng raised the question of socialist transformation, in which China's economy of low productive force was a transitional period, a position which Mao Zedong endorsed briefly until 1957. When discussing the necessity of commodity relations at the first Shenzhou Conference, 2nd to 10th November 2nd to November 10, 1958. For example, Mao, the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee, said that China was in the initial stage of socialism. However, Mao never elaborated on the idea, and his successors were left to do this. After Mao Zedong's death on 5th of May 1978, the article "Putting into Effect the Socialist Principle of Distribution According to Work." Putting into effect the socialist principle of distribution according to work. Putting into effect on 5th May 1978. Putting into effect the socialist principle of distribution according to work elaborated on the idea that China was still at the first stage of reaching pure communism. In Marxist thought, a communist society or the communist system is the type of society and economic system postulated to emerge from technological advances in the productive forces, representing the ultimate goal of the political ideology of communism. A communist society is characterized by common ownership, and that it had not become a truly socialist society. But that China was still at the first stage of reaching pure communism, and that it had not become a truly socialist society. Here we must understand, and of course, from what I've read and studied Marxism, communism, of course, in Karl Marx's writings, the Communist Manifesto, Marxism socialism was never intended to be solely a national affair. It was always to be about the whole world, global, international, universal. It was so in many ways when some communist socialism, Trotskyist, whatever, argues that communism as envisioned socialism by Karl Marx was never truly achieved, that is not pure fiction. That is, there is some truth in that fiction, because originally in the writings, socialism, communism, aka Marxism from Karl Marx and Engels, the the socialism, communism was to be a universal, global, international society without states. And so when somebody says that in truth it was never achieved, that is, as I said in the Communist Manifesto, that is indeed true, but just that sole argument. The others can go around, whatever. It had not become a truly socialist society. The article was written by members in the State Council's Political Research Office, led by economist Yu Wangyan, on the orders of Deng Xiaoping, so as to criticize and repudiate the beliefs of the communist left. After reading it, Deng himself authored a brief memo saying that it was well written and shows that the nature of distribution by labor is not capitalist but socialist. And to implement this principle, many things are to be done and many institutions to be revived. And all this is to give incentives for us to do better. The term appeared at the 6th plenum of the 11th Central Committee on 27th of June 1981 in the document Resolution on Certain Questions in the History of Our Party Since the Founding of the PRC, People's Republic of China. Hu Yaobao, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, used the term in his report to the 12th National Congress on 1st of September 1982. Not until the resolution concerning the guiding principle in building socialist spiritual civilization. It was not until the resolution concerning the guiding principle in building socialist spiritual civilization. Well, the word here is spiritual. That's what it is. I mean, I'm reading here, and I think I might have read this before, and I was kind of surprised thinking about spiritual, socialist spiritual civilization is certainly myself as a universal spiritual teacher, learning things every day, believing in reincarnation. I have a simple position when I say the dancing goddess that dances with her brother the sun to make, create, and produce all fruits, vegetables, and legumes, even those in ancient Egypt to make the pyramids, and those who built and harvested by brothers and sisters, farmers, for the Romans to build the roads, aqueducts, and the Great Wall of China. And today, in July 2021, for our brothers and sisters that harvest the goods of the fruits, vegetables, and legumes that are made, created, and produced by the dance of the goddess with her brother the sun, which are brothers and sisters, workers, or anybody doing everything in civilization to upgrade, maintain, or build civilization does those fruits. And today, skyscrapers in New York being built, or Montreal, Hawk Island, Beijing, Tel Aviv, Berlin, Lagos. Anyways, it was not until the resolution concerning the guiding principle in building socialist spiritual civilization at the 6th plenum of the 12th Central Committee that the term was used in the defense of the economic reforms which were being introduced. At the 13th National Congress, Acting General Secretary Zhao Zhijiang, resolution concerning the guiding principle in building socialist spiritual civilization. The necessity to create a new socialist spiritual civilization was first mentioned by Deng Xiaoping in December 1980. This complex was to be based on the four basic principles, which were supposed to act as a brake on the modernization process. Socialist spiritual civilization. The most important element in this learning process is the building of a system of socialist spiritual civilization. Deng Xiaoping first raised the concept in 1980, and it subsequently has become one of the main planks of Jiang Zemin's political program. Socialist spiritual civilization. Socialist spiritual civilization. So, as a universal spiritual teaching student, I'm learning things every day. I believe that we have a main trinity in us: the lower self, the medium self, if you want, and the higher self. Myself, I'm not always in the higher self. I'm not always in the lowest. Thank goodness. Somewhere my foot is on the highest, more noble, more giving, more charitable. Some more selfish. Like someone, but mostly in the middle. Mostly in the middle. And universal revolutionary centrist. The 13th National Congress Acting General Secretary Zhao Ziyang was a high-ranking politician in the People's Republic of China. On behalf of the 12th Central Committee, delivered the report, Advance Along the Road of Socialism with Chinese Characteristics. He wrote that China was a socialist society, but that socialism in China was in its primary stage. A Chinese peculiarity which was due to the undeveloped state of the country's productive forces. During the phase of development, Zhao recommended introducing a planned commodity economy on the basis of public ownership. The main failure of the communist right, according to Zhao, was that they failed to acknowledge that China could reach socialism by bypassing capitalism. The main failure of the communist left was that they held the utopian position. That China could bypass the primary stage of socialism in which the productive forces are to be modernized. On 5th of October 1987, Yu Guangyuan, a major author of the concept, published an article entitled Economy in the Initial Stage of Socialism and speculated that this historical stage will last for 2 decades and perhaps much longer. This represents, said Ian Wilson, a severe blight on the expectations raised during the early 70s, when the old 8-grade wage scale was being compressed to only 3 levels and a more even distributive system was assumed to be an important national goal. On the 25th of October, Zhao further expounded on the concept of the primary stage of socialism and said that the party line was to follow one center, 2 basic points. The central focus of the Chinese state was economic development, but that this should occur simultaneously through centralized political control, i.e. the 4 cardinal principles. The 4 cardinal principles were stated by Deng Xiaoping in March 1979 during the early phase of reform and opening up, and are the 4 issues for which debate was not allowed within the People's Republic of China. Well, for which debate was not allowed within the quite restrictive, authoritarian, we gotta say. That's in 1979 here. Debate was not allowed because the Soviet Union was still powerful, and USSR, United Socialist Soviet Republic, was not still superpower. Was not allowed within the People's Republic of China. 4 cardinal principles were one of Deng's 2 basic points, and upholding the policy of reform and opening up. General Secretary Jiang Zemin further elaborated on a concept 10 years later, first during a speech to the Central Party School on 29th May 1997, and again in his report to the 15th National Congress on 12th of September. According to Jiang, the third plenum of the 11th Central Committee correctly analyzed and formulated a scientifically correct program for the problems facing China and socialism. In Jiang's words, the primary stage of socialism was an undeveloped stage. The fundamental task of socialism is to develop the productive forces. Therefore, the main aim during the primary stage should be the further development of the national productive forces. The primary contradiction in Chinese society during the primary stage of socialism is the growing material and cultural needs of the people and the backwardness of production. Contradiction will remain until China has completed the process of primary stage of socialism, and because of it, economic development should remain the party's main focus during this stage. Jiang elaborated on 3 points to develop the primary stage of socialism. The first, to develop a socialist economy with Chinese characteristics, meant developing the economy by emancipating and modernizing the forces of production while developing a market economy. The second, building socialist politics with Chinese characteristics, meant managing state affairs according to the law, developing socialist democracy under the party. Socialist democracy under the party. This is important. Developing socialist democracy under the party, and making the people the masters of the country. The third point, building socialist culture with Chinese characteristics, meant turning Marxism into the guide to train the people so as to give them high ideals, moral integrity, a good education, and a strong sense of discipline, and developing a national, scientific, and popular socialist culture geared to the needs of modernization of the world and of the future. Of the world and of the future. So you see there are the more universal aspects of it. Of the world, because it's mentioned of the world. When asked how long the primary stage of socialism would last, Zhao replied, it will be at least 100 years before socialist modernization will have been in the main accomplished. Wow. The state constitution states that China will be in the primary stage of socialism for a long time to come. Primary stage of socialism for a long time to come. Wow. Zhang believed that it would take at least 100 years to reach a more advanced stage. Socialist market economy. Deng Xiaoping, the architect of the Chinese economic reforms. The Chinese economic reform, or reform and opening up, known in the West as the opening of China, is the program of economic reforms termed socialism with Chinese characteristics, and socialist market economy in the People's Republic of China, led by Deng Xiaoping, but did not believe that the market economy was synonymous with capitalism, or that planning was synonymous with socialism. During his southern tour, he said that planning and market forces are not the essential difference between socialism and capitalism. A planned economy is not the definition of socialism, because there is planning under capitalism. The market economy happens under socialism too. Planning and market forces are both ways of controlling economic activity. Planning and market forces are both ways of controlling. Seems like a paradox, right? Market fundamentalism is unpractical. People's Daily, Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, February 3. Socialist market economy. Deng Xiaoping, the architect of Chinese economic reform. Ideological justification. In the 1980s, it became evident to Chinese economists that the Marxist theory of the law of value, understood as the expression of the labor theory of value, could not serve as the basis of China's pricing system. They concluded that Marx never intended his theory of law of value to work as an expression of concretized labor time. Marx's notion of prices of production was meaningless to the Soviet-styled planned economy, since price formations were, according to Marx, established by markets. Soviet planners had used the law of value as a basis to rationalize prices in the planned economy. According to Soviet sources, prices were planned with an eye to the basic requirements of the law of value. However, the primary fault with the Soviet interpretation was that they tried to calibrate prices without a competitive market, since according to Marx, competitive markets allowed for an equilibrium of profit rates, which led to an increase of prices of production. The rejection of the Soviet interpretation of the law of value led to the acceptance of the idea that China was still in the primary stage of socialism. The basic argument was that conditions envisioned by Marx for reaching the socialist stage of development did not yet exist in China. Socialist mode of production, also referred to communist mode of production, the lower stage of communism, or simply socialism, as Karl Marx and Friedrich used the terms communism and socialism interchangeably. Mao said that the imposition of progressive relations of production. Relations of production is a concept frequently used by Marx and Friedrich Engels in their theory of historical materials Das Kapital, would revolutionize production. His successor's rejection of this view, according to A. James Gregor, has thwarted the ideological continuity of Maoism, officially Mao Zedong taught. Classical Marxism had argued that a socialist revolution would only take place in advanced capitalist societies, and its success would signal the transition from a capitalist commodity-based economy to a product economy in which goods would be distributed for people's need and not for profit. If because of a lack of a coherent explanation in the chance of failure, this revolution did not occur, the revolutionaries would be forced to take over the responsibilities of the bourgeoisie. Chinese communists are thus looking for a new Marxist theory of development. Party theorist Luo Rongguo recognized that the founders of Marxism had never formulated any systematic theory on the development of the non-Western world, and said that the Chinese Communist Party should establish their own synthesized theoretical framework to study the problem of modern development. According to A. James McGregor, the implication of this stance is that Chinese Marxism is currently in a state of profound theoretical discontinuity. The ideology Chinese Marxism, the ideology of the Chinese Communist Party, has undergone dramatic changes throughout the years, especially in Deng Xiaoping's leadership and now Xi Jinping's leadership. While some commentators have stated that the Chinese Communist Party lacks a coherent ideology, Communist Party is on Marxist Leninism. Private ownership. The Chinese government's understanding of private ownership is rooted in classical Marxism. Since China adopted socialism when it was a semi-feudal and semi-colonial country, it is in the primary stage of socialism. Because of this, certain policies and system characteristics, such as commodity production for the market, the existence of a private sector, and the reliance of the profit motive in enterprise management, were changed. These changes were allowed as long as they improved productivity and modernized the means of production, and thus further developed socialism. The Chinese Communist Party still considers private ownership to be non-socialist. However, according to party theorists, the existence and growth of private ownership does not necessarily undermine socialism and promote capitalism in China. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, never proposed the immediate abolishment of private ownership. According to Engels' book Principles of Communism, the proletariat can only abolish private ownership when the necessary conditions have been met. In the phase before the abolishment of private ownership, Engels proposed progressive taxation, high inheritance taxes, like Trump, tax Trump, myself, born dragon, motto of the Dragon Armies, nobody's born a dragon, not inheriting anything. Trump inherited millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, started a trade war with China. Dragon's fists are gonna make Trump's nose grow like Pinocchio, granddaddy. Trump. Nothing against you personally. Engels proposed progressive taxation, high inheritance taxes, and compulsory bond purchases. Yeah, because I mean, if think about it just like that, forget Marxism, communism, theory, whatever. If let's say democracy, if somebody inherits like Trump, $400 million like Trump, myself inherited that, and a starting point is fit democracy and take advantage of the free market system. Well, we're not. It's not really democratic, not really equal opportunity there. Somebody inherited the wealth, right? So high inheritance taxes, and compulsory bond purchases to restrict private property while using the competitive powers of state-owned enterprises to expand the public sector. Marx and Engels proposed similar measures in the Communist Manifesto in regards to advanced countries, but since China was economically undeveloped, party theorists called for flexibility. But since China was economically undeveloped, party theorists called for flexibility regarding the party's handling of private property. According to party theorist Liu Shuiyuan, the new economic policy program initiated by Soviet authorities in the aftermath of the war communism program is a good example of flexibility by socialist authorities. Party theorist Li Shuai said that private ownership inevitably involves capitalist exploitation. However, Li regards private property and exploitation as necessary in the primary stage of socialism, claiming that capitalism in its primary stage uses remnants of the old society to build itself. Fascinating. Sun claiming that capitalism in its primary stage uses remnants of the old society to build itself. Primary remnants of the old society to build itself. Primary stage uses remnants of the old society to build itself. Sun Liancheng and Liu Huigelin said that Marx and Engels, in their interpretation of the Communist Manifesto, criticized private ownership when it was owned solely by the bourgeoisie, interesting, but not individual ownership in which everyone owns the means of production and hence cannot be exploited by others. Fascinating points. Individual ownership is considered consistent with socialism since Marx wrote that post capitalist society would entail the rebuilding of associated social individual ownership. What is socialism and what is Marxism? This is a speech discussing Marxist theory at a Central Committee plenum June 30, 1984. June 30, 84. 30th of June 1984 by Deng Xiaoping. What is socialism and what is Marxism? We were not quite clear about this in the past. Marxism attaches utmost importance to developing the productive forces. We have said that socialism is the primary stage of communism and that at the advanced stage the principle of from each according to his ability and to each according to his needs. Well, to my needs I could definitely use a massage right now and I'm sorry and cannot afford it. Massage therapist. Anybody willingly love it. From each according to his ability, but can give massage, rub, clean, blah blah blah. From each according to his ability and to each according to his needs will be applied. This calls for highly developed productive forces and an overwhelming abundance of material wealth. Therefore, the fundamental task for the socialist stage is to develop the productive forces. The superiority of the socialist system is demonstrated in the final analysis by faster and greater development of those forces that under the capitalist system than the superiority of the socialist system is demonstrated in the final analysis by faster and greater development of those forces than under the capitalist system. As they develop, the people's material and cultural life will constantly improve. One of our shortcomings after the founding of the People's Republic was that we didn't pay enough attention to so this is 37 years after the founding of the almost 37 years after the founding of the this found 49 36 years People's Republic was that we didn't pay enough attention to development when the speech was given. It was about more than 36 years after the founding in 84 49 6 after the founding of the People's Republic was that we didn't pay enough attention to developing the productive forces. Socialism means eliminating poverty. Pauperism is not socialism, still less communism. Deng Xiaoping, 1984. You have it. So this is socialism with Chinese characteristics from Wikipedia. Now we'll go to the other one article to learn and educate myself as much as matters. So it's gonna be Maoism. Maoism, or Mao Zedong taught. Mao Zedong Shishang is a variety of Marxism-Leninism that Mao Zedong developed for realizing a socialist revolution in the agriculture, pre-industrial society of the Republic of China and later the People's Republic of China. The philosophical difference between Maoism and traditional Marxism-Leninism is that the peasantry and the revolutionary vanguard in pre-industrial societies rather than the proletariat are the philosophical difference between Maoism and traditional Marxism-Leninism is that the peasantry are the revolutionary vanguard in pre-industrial societies rather than the proletariat. This updating and adaptation of Marxism-Leninism to Chinese conditions, in which revolutionary praxis is primary and ideological orthodoxy is secondary, represents urban Marxism-Leninism adapted to pre-industrial China. The claim that Mao Zedong had adapted Marxism-Leninism to Chinese conditions evolved into the idea that he had updated it in a fundamental way, applying to the world as a whole. From the 1950s until the Chinese economic reforms of Deng Xiaoping in the late 1970s, Maoism was the political and military ideology of the Communist Party of China and of Maoist, which is still the ruling party of China, one-party state still, of course, and of Maoist revolutionary movements throughout the world. After the Sino-Soviet split of the 1960s, the Communist Party of China and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union each claimed to be the sole heir and successor to Joseph Stalin concerning the correct interpretation of Marxism-Leninism and ideological leader of world communism. World communism, also known as global communism, a form of communism which has an international scope. The long-term goal of world communism is a worldwide communist society that is stateless, which may be achieved through an intermediate term goal of either a voluntary association, nation states. The term Maoism is a creation of Mao's supporters. Mao himself rejected it. So the concepts. Concepts of Maoism are greater society, antagonistic contradiction, anti-imperialism, anti-revisionism, cultural revolution, Marxism-Leninism, mass line, new democracy, people's war, proletarian nation, revolutionary base area, self-criticism, social imperialism, three worlds theory. In the field of international relations, the three worlds theory by Mao Zedong proposed to the visiting Algerian President Houari Boumediene in February 1974 was that the international system operated as three contradictory political economic worlds. Social imperialism. As a political term, social imperialism is the political ideology of people, parties, or nations that are, according to Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin, socialist in words, imperialist in deeds. In academia, it refers to governments that engage in imperialism. Antagonistic contradiction is the notion that compromise between different social classes is impossible, and their relations must be of class struggle. The term is most often applied in Maoist theory, which holds that differences between the two primary classes, the working class, proletariat, and the bourgeoisie, are antagonistic. So, concepts in Maoism. Theoretical works. Report on investigation on the peasant movement in Hunan, Mao Zedong, of March 1927. Often called the Hunan Report, is one of Mao Zedong's most famous and influential essays. The report is based on a several-month visit to his home countryside. On contradiction. on Contradiction is a 1937 essay by the Chinese Communist Revolutionary Mao Zedong. I've read them years ago, but remember. Along on Practice, it forms the philosophical underpinnings of the political ideology that would later become Marxism, written in August 1937. On Practice. On Practice is one of Mao Zedong's most important philosophical works, along with On Contradiction. This essay is a part of lectures Mao gave in 1937. It expresses Mao's support for Marxism and attempts to establish the distinctly Chinese brand of communist philosophy. On guerrilla warfare is Mao Zedong's case for the extensive use of an irregular form of warfare in which small groups of combatants use mobile military tactics in the forms of ambushes and raids to combat a larger and less mobile formal army. Mao wrote the book in 1937. On Protracted War is a work comprising a series of speeches by Mao Zedong given from 1938 May 26 to June 3 at the Yan'an Association for the Study of War of Resistance Against Japan. Protracted People's War. A Critique of Soviet Economics is a work of Marxist-Leninist political economy written by Mao Zedong. It was written between 1958 and 1959 and includes a critique of two Soviet works, Economic Problems of Socialism in the USSR. Quotations from Chairman Mao. Quotations from Chairman Mao is a book of statements from speeches and writings by Mao Zedong, the former chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, published from 1964 to 1976 and widely distributed during the Cultural Revolution. Historic 8 documents are a set of 8 monographs authored by the Indian Maoist revolutionary Charles Majumdar that outline the ideological principles on which the Naxalite militant communist movement in India was based. He laid down the idea that the Indian state was a bourgeois institution. Modern Chinese intellectual tradition. At the turn of the 20th century, the contemporary Chinese intellectual tradition was defined by two central concepts: iconoclasm and nationalism. Iconoclastic revolution and anti-Confucianism. By the turn of the 20th century, a proportionally small yet socially significant cross-section of China's traditional elite, your landlords and bureaucrats, found themselves increasingly skeptical of the efficacy and even the moral validity of Confucianism. Skeptical iconoclasts formed a new segment of Chinese society, a modern intelligentsia whose arrival, or as historian of China Maurice Meisner would label it, their defection heralded the beginning of the destruction of the gentry as a social class in China. The fall of the last imperial Chinese dynasty in 1911 marked the final failure of the Confucian moral order, and it didn't much to make Confucianism synonymous with political and social conservatism. New culture movement. Nationalism and the appeal of Marxism. Differences with Marxism. Maoism and Marxism differ in the ways in which the proletariat are defined and in which political and economic conditions would start a communist revolution. 1. For Karl Marx, the proletariat were the urban working class, which was determined in the revolution by which the bourgeoisie overthrew feudalism. For Mao Zedong, the proletariat were the millions of peasants he referred to as the popular masses. Mao based his revolution upon the peasantry. They possessed, according to him, two qualities. One, they were poor, and two, they were a political blank state. In Mao's words, a clean sheet of paper has no blotches, and so the newest and most beautiful words can be written on it. It's true. For Marx, the proletarian revolution was internally fueled by the capitalist mode of production. That as capitalists developed, a tension arises between the productive forces and the mode of production. The political tension between the productive forces, the workers and the owners of the means of production, the capitalists, would be an inevitable incentive to proletarian revolution, which would result in communist society. Mao did not subscribe to Marx's theory of inevitable cyclicality in the economic system. His goal was to unify the Chinese nation and so realize progressive change for China in the form of communism. Hence, revolution was needed at once. People's War, holding that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. Mao has emphasized that revolutionary struggle of the vast majority of people against the exploited classes and their state structures, which Mao termed a people's war, mobilizing large parts of rural populations to revolt against established institutions by engaging in guerrilla warfare. Mass line. Contrary to the Leninist vanguard model employed by the Bolsheviks, the theory of the mass line holds that the party must not be separate from the popular masses, either in policy or in revolutionary struggle. To conduct a successful revolution, the needs and demands of the masses must be told to the party so that the party can interpret them with a Marxist view. And then Mark Zedong's cult of personality, and does a little bit of Maoism, and now we'll go to fast forward a bit in the history since July 2021 and the trade war began. Xi Jinping was the leader of China, and them inviting, of course, Xi Jinping to a cup of coffee in this modest room off Sun Temple for world peace. And I will say, He Hong Joe. Myself a cup of coffee a little bit. Xi Jinping thought. Xi Jinping being, of course, the current leader of China. Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, commonly abbreviated as Xi Jinping thought, is a set of policies and ideas derived from the writings and speeches of Chinese Communist Party General Secretary Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is a Chinese politician who has served as General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party CCP and Chairman of the Central Military Commission CMC since 2012 and President of the People's Republic of China. A little bit about Xi Jinping. Born 15th of June 1953. Assumed office November 15, 2012. He has often been described as a dictator or an authoritarian leader by political and academic observers, citing an increase of censorship and mass surveillance, a deterioration in human rights, the cult of personality developing around him, and the removal of term limits for the leadership under his tenure. Xi's political thoughts have been incorporated into the party and national constitution. As the central figure of the fifth generation of leadership of the People's Republic, Xi has significantly centralized institutional power by taking a wide range of leadership positions, including chairing the newly formed National Security Commission, as well as new steering committees on economic and social reforms, military restructuring and modernization, and the Internet. Note 27. Journal of Current Chinese Affairs. Retrieved from original. Belt and Road Initiative was unveiled by Xi in September and October 2013 during visits to Kazakhstan and Indonesia, and was thereafter promoted by Premier Li Kengyang during state visits to Asia and Europe. Xi, Xi made the announcement for the initiative while in Astana, Kazakhstan, and called it a golden opportunity. BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, has been called Xi's signature project, involving numerous infrastructure development and investment projects throughout Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. BRI was added to the CCP Constitution at the closing session of the 19th Party Congress on 24th of October 2017, further elevating its importance. US President Donald Trump arrives in China 8th of November 2017, and of course a few months later, the US-China trade war, which some claim is due to the success of the Belt and Road Initiative, which certainly has some trillion dollars worth of. The Belt and Road Initiative, known in Chinese and formally in English as One Belt, One Road, or OBOR, One Belt, One Road, for short, is a global infrastructure development strategy adopted by the Chinese government in 2013 to invest in nearly 70 countries and international organizations. It is considered a centerpiece of Chinese Communist Party General Secretary and Chinese leader Xi Jinping's foreign policy. Originally announced the strategy as the Silk Road Economic Belt, a visit to Kazakhstan in September 2013. Short for 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. 8 years ago, people promote economic development and inter-regional connectivity. China has engaged 138 countries and 30 international organizations in the BRI Belt and Road Initiative. Infrastructure projects include ports, railways, highways, power stations, aviation, and telecommunications. The flagship projects include the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the Botan-Vientiane Railway and in Laos, and Korgas Land Port. Countries which signed cooperation documents related to the Belt and Road Initiative. Almost all of Africa. There's only 3 countries in Africa which have not signed, as that India has not signed, Australia, New Zealand. Eastern Europe, many of it Turkey, has signed. Even, I think, Italy. In Europe, Hungary, Romania. I think Germany has not, England has not, France has not, Portugal has. Build Back Better World, and this is, I'm going to read a bit on this. Build Back Better World because it's more recent, and with the ongoing crisis with the G7 and the recent escalations between China and the West. Build Back Better World, Build Back Better World, or B3W, is an initiative undertaken by G7 countries. So it's important here because of the of what's going on with China today, and then we'll go back to Xi Jinping. So because the relations have deteriorated, and Build Back Better World, or B3W, is an initiative undertaken by G7 countries. Launched in June 2021, the initiative is designed to counter China's strategic influence by providing an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative for the infrastructure development of the low and middle income countries, led by the United States. The G7 countries will work to address the 40 trillion worth of 40 trillion worth of infrastructure needed by developing countries by 2035. The initiative aims to catalyze funding for quality infrastructure from the private sector and will encourage private sector investments that support climate, health and health security, digital technology and gender equity and equality. Purpose: promote economic development and interregional connectivity. On June 7, 2021, the OECD committed to support the Blue Dot Network at a meeting of the Executive Consultation Group in Paris, China. Initiative undertaken by G7 countries, launched in June 2021. G7 countries are, of course, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, all the others, and the European Union as a whole, right? So Build Back Better World, B3W, is an initiative undertaken by G7 countries, launched in June 2021, last month. The initiative is designed to counter China's strategic influence by providing an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative for the infrastructure development of the low and middle income countries. The Clean Network. This is also important, and now I'm going to report back. The Clean Network is a U.S. government-led bipartisan effort to address what it describes as the long-term threat to data privacy, security, human rights, and principled collaboration posed to the free world from authoritarian malign actors. It has resulted in an alliance of democracies and companies based on democratic values. According to the United States, the Clean Network is intended to implement internationally accepted digital trust standards across a coalition of trusted partners. December 2020, the United States announced that more than 60 nations, representing more than two-thirds of the world's gross domestic product, and 200 telecom companies have publicly committed to the principles of the Clean Network. This alliance of democracies includes 27 of the 30 NATO members, 26 of the 27 EU members, 31 of the 37 OECD nations, 11 of the 12 3Cs nations, as well as Japan, Israel, Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, Canada, Vietnam, India, and New Zealand. On January 20, 2021, the People's Republic of China sanctioned former Undersecretary of State Keith Krach and his family because, according to the Washington Post, of his effectiveness in leading the Clean Network. On April 12, 2021, Harvard Business School published a case study on the Clean Network and the future of global technology competition. History. February 14, 2020, at the 2020 Munich Security Conference, Speaker Nancy Pelosi warned European countries they will choose autocracy over democracy if they let Huawei take part in rolling out 5G technology, in a sign of bipartisan U.S. political pressure over the Chinese company. Reng Zhenfei, founder of Huawei. So back to Xi Jinping. Oh, that's important. One thing is the US-China trade war. Real quick. So the China-United States trade war. And keep in mind, this was one of the events, geopolitical financial events, that made me create the World War III scenario, which was created and designed to go hand in hand with my workout, officially titled General War Integrated Total Body Training System, aka the 300 workout. Back in October 2019, which in a nearly paradoxical providential way resembles the COVID-19 health and financial crisis and predates it by about 93 days or so. Paradoxically, as a world peace advocate, independent student, scholar of history, geopolitics, wars, and civilization, I'm learning things every day. And independent security analyst and theorist. Created that scenario, October 2017 was the first session which I've held, and the parallel timeline of the scenario in a not so distant future. The World War III in my scenario was triggered by a global financial collapse, a global stock market crash, which occurred in real life, February 20th, due to COVID. My trinity on COVID, first and foremost, believe I don't know first and foremost for sure what caused COVID. Second, I believe it was snakes to human beings. And third, since I don't know for sure, cannot rule out another possibility, XYZ, being an accident in the lab, an experiment gone wrong, or a bioweapon. To that trinity of not knowing for sure, thinking it was snakes transmitted COVID to human beings, or being an accident, an experiment, or a bioweapon. Fourth dimension to that trinity on COVID. What do know 100% without a doubt is that before COVID, October 17 held my first session of the General War Integrated Total Body Training System, aka the 300 workout, right here in this room off Sun Temple. And that workout was made, created, and designed to go hand in hand with the World War III scenario, which in a nearly paradoxical providential way resembles the COVID-19 health and financial crises, and predates it by about 93 days or so. And since COVID hit, and the COVID-induced stock market crash beginning February 20th and then April 7th, and which triggered global recessions and some parts depressions worldwide, since July 24th, 2020, founded the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Empire and the Phoenix People's Party, to calling on the establishment of the International Citizen Integrated Social Security Force, aka the Dragon Army, just as envisioned in my scenario, in order to secure the three elements of civilization: food, housing, and transport for all first of NATO member countries, by creating the Dragon Army. And once we have those secured, food, housing, and transport, we can encourage people to work out, train, volunteer, and exercise, do community work, socially rewarded community work, and volunteerism. And we'll be ready for, if COVID mutates, variants, be ready for the next pandemic as a whole. So human civilization for world peace, international justice and security, global freedom and universal love. China-United States trade war is an ongoing economic conflict between China and the United States. US President Donald Trump in January 2018 began setting tariffs and other trade barriers on China with the goal of forcing it to make changes to what the US says are unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. The Trump administration stated that these practices may contribute to the US-China trade deficit and that the Chinese government requires transfer of American technology to China. In response to US trade measures, the Chinese government accused the Trump administration of engaging in nationalist protectionism and took retaliatory action. After the trade war was escalated through 2019, on January 15, 2020, the two sides reached a Phase 1 agreement. However, tensions continued to persist by the end of the Trump presidency. The trade war was widely characterized as largely a failure. Xi Jinping thought. Set of policies and ideas derived from the writings and speeches of Chinese Communist Party General Secretary Xi Jinping. It was officially mentioned in the 19th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party in 2017, in which it was incorporated into Constitution of the Chinese Communist Party. At the first session of the 13th National People's Congress on 11th of March 2018, the preamble of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China was amended to mention Xi Jinping thought, history and development. The first official mention of the term was at the 19th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, having gradually been developed since 2012. When Xi became General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, China's paramount leader. Chinese politics, the paramount leader or supreme leader of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, Government of China and the People's Republic of China, is an informal term for the most prominent political leader in the People's Republic of China. Some news sources have stated that Xi helped create this ideology together with his close advisor Wang Huning. Wang Huning is a Chinese political theorist and one of the top leaders of the Communist Party of China, a current member of the party's Politburo, Standing Committee, and first-ranked secretary of the party's Secretariat. The first indication of Xi's platform had come out in a speech titled "Some Questions on Maintaining and Developing Some Questions on Maintaining and Developing Socialism with Chinese Characteristics," given to the newly elected Central Committee on January 5, 2013, and was later published by Central Documents pressed in the journal Kishi. Kishi is the leading official theoretical journal of the Chinese Communist Party, published bi-monthly by the Central Party School and the Central Committee. A billboard advertised Xi Jinping taught in Shenzhen, Guangdong, and SINO Communist Chinese Party. Socialism with Chinese Characteristics. Much of Xi Jinping thought comes from Xi's 2013 speech, which focused on Marx and Mao. China's place in history, strategic competition with capitalist nations, and a plea to adhere to the goals of communism. In surveying the history of China, Xi argued it is Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong thought that guided the Chinese people out of the darkness of that long night and established a new China. Have been on the dark says that Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong thought that guided the Chinese people out of the darkness of that long night and established a new China. I've been on the darkness of a long night myself, struggling, chronic illness, poverty, precarious work, reading thousands of books in many libraries across the island of Montreal. And Jacob, struggling all night, reminds me of that story. Dawn is being renamed. Yours truly, Adrian Hannah Dragon, being reborn, died during COVID, Adrian H. And as to the future, the consolidation and development of the socialist system will require its own long period of history. It will require the tireless struggle of generation, up to 10 generations. On the relationship with capitalist nations, Xi said, Marx and Engels' analysis of the basic contradictions in capitalist society is not outdated, nor is the historical materialist view that capitalism is bound to die out and socialism is bound to win. Wow. On the relationship with capitalist nations, Xi said, Marx and Engels' analysis of the basic contradictions in capitalist society is not outdated, nor is the historical materialist view that capitalism is bound to die out and socialism is bound to win. Xi aimed to reinforce the Marxist view of history, stating, the fundamental reason why some of our comrades have weak ideals and faltering beliefs is that their views lack a firm grounding in historical materialism. On the relationship with capitalism, Xi said, Marx and Engels' analysis of the basic contradiction in capitalist society is not outdated, nor is the historical materialist view that capitalism is bound to die out and socialism is bound to win. Xi aimed to reinforce the Marxist view of history, stating, the fundamental reason why some of our comrades have weak ideals and faltering beliefs is that their views lack a firm grounding in historical materialism. Xi showed great interest in why the Soviet Union dissolved. Why did the Soviet Union disintegrate? Why did the Soviet Communist Party fall from power? An important reason was that the struggle in the field of ideology was extremely intense, completely negating the history of the Soviet Union, negating the history of the Soviet Communist Party, negating Lenin, negating Stalin, creating historical nihilism and confused thinking. Party organs at all levels had lost their functions. The military was no longer on the party leadership. In the end, the Soviet Communist Party, a great party, was scattered. The Soviet Union, a great socialist country, disintegrated. This is a cautionary tale. 30 years after the Tiananmen Memory and Era of Xi Jinping, Journal of Democracy, retrieved 11 September 2020. The concepts behind Xi Jinping thought were elaborated in Xi's The Governance of China book series. The Governance of China is a three-volume collection of speeches and writings by Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, and current paramount leader of China, presenting the official party line for China's development in the 21st century. The collection is an authoritative source of Xi Jinping thought and a leader's successor to Mao Zedong's quotation from Chairman Mao. The volumes were published in 2014, 2017, and 2020. Featured in the 19th Congress. Xi first made mention of the thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era in the opening day speech delivered to the 19th Party Congress in October 2017. Xi has described the thought as part of the broad framework created around socialism with Chinese characteristics, a term coined by Deng Xiaoping, which places China in the primary stage of socialism. Content. Xi Jinping thought consists of a 14 basic policy as follows. 1. Ensuring Chinese Communist Party leadership over all forms of work in China. 2. The Chinese Communist Party should take a people-centric approach for the public interest. 3. The continuation of comprehensive deepening of reforms. 4. Adopting new science-based ideas for innovating coordinated green, open and shared development. 5. Following socialism with Chinese characteristics with people as the masters of the country. 6. Governing China with rule of law. 7. Practice socialist core values, including Marxism, communism, and socialism with Chinese characteristics. 8. Improving people's livelihood and well-being as the primary goal of development. 9. Coexist well with nature. Interesting. Nature, with energy conservation and environmental protection policies, and contribute to global ecological safety. Strengthen the national security of China. The Chinese Communist Party should have absolute leadership over China's People Liberation Army, the PLA, promoting the one country, two systems system for Hong Kong and Macau, with a future of complete national reunification, and to follow Taiwan, that is, and to follow one China policy and 1992 consensus for Taiwan. One China policy is a policy certain there is only one sovereign state under the name China. People's Republic of China and the ROC establish a common destiny between Chinese people and other people around the world with a peaceful international environment. Establish a common destiny between Chinese people and other people around the world with a peaceful environment. 13. Peaceful international environment. Establish a common destiny between Chinese people and other people around the world with a peaceful international environment. Improve party discipline in the Chinese Communist Party. Wow. And with that, I've learned something today, post-Sabbath. Yes. Yours truly, Adrian being reborn, Adrian Hannah Dragon, world peace advocate, independent student, scholar of history, wars, global civilization, and androgynous pansexual founder of the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Army for world peace, international security and justice, global freedom and universal love. See you later.